Hi, today I want to talk about syntax. It's the one thing that teachers and students always are nervous about and often try to avoid. I hope to demystify it a little bit and build people's confidence in tackling it. We show our linguistic competence by forming sentences that are grammatically acceptable. We also show our analytical competence by being able to identify grammatically acceptable sequences or their absence when we're examining a text. Well-formed sequences of lexemes operate at all levels of language and in all modes, both spoken and written. So what makes a sentence? Every sentence contains a subject and a predicate. The subject refers to what or who is doing the action within the sentence. This is normally found at the beginning of a sentence. However, it doesn't have to be there. The predicate tells us about the subject. It contains the verb and a direct and indirect object, etc., etc. So the way you want to parse your sentence is always locate the verb first. Usually what precedes it is the subject. Usually what follows it is the predicate. If a group of words do not contain both a subject and a predicate, then it's not a sentence that you're looking at, but rather it's a phrase. So a sentence without a subject is a phrase. A phrase is a group of two or more words which act as a part of speech. They generally don't contain either a subject or a finite verb. So in order for a verb to be finite, it must contain a subject, a tense, and a number. So for instance, a phrase would look like loving life. Subject, tense, it's present tense. Does it have a number? No. Therefore, this equals a phrase. It's not a sentence. It doesn't have a subject, a verb, and predicate. So types of phrases. There are a number of types of phrases that you can identify in your transcripts. The first is a noun phrase. So the noun is the main part of the noun phrase. And these are examples of noun phrases. Our club, the championship team. Our team defeated the championship team. Verb phrase. A verb phrase includes an auxiliary verb and a main verb. Now, examples of a verb phrase is leaving, may return, had better not fail, have been. So Julie is leaving, but she might return. A prepositional phrase, preposition begins the phrase. So in the morning, or from 2000 to 2021. With a frown because of the food. In the morning, you always see Julie with a frown. Prepositional phrases are adjective phrases when they modify nouns. They are adverbial phrases when they modify verbs. Let me repeat that. A prepositional phrase are adjective phrases or adjective phrases when they modify nouns. They are adverbial phrases when they modify the verb. So types of phrases. First of all, the adjective phrase. In the following example, a prepositional phrase modifies the noun man. With the baseball cap is an adjective phrase. It is a prepositional phrase that acts as an adjective. The man with the baseball cap sneezed, or the man with the baseball cap shouted. An adverbial phrase, these are prepositional phrases, and in these sentences are adverbial phrases. They answer questions such as how, when, why, and where. They modify the verbs. So that's how you can identify an adverbial phrase. The witch disappeared in a puff of steam. So that's saying the how. Sally sneezed during lunch. That's giving us the when. Jack kicked the ball over the top of the goal. That says where. They could not see the sign because of the fog. And that answers the why. So anything that has a how, when, why, where, something that modifies the verbs, these are adverbial phrases, adding to the verb. So other types of phrases. There are other kinds of phrases. There's a gerund phrase which contains a gerund and ing form of a verb. A gerund phrase is the subject of the sentence. At the side there, jogging slowly and regularly is great exercise. So that's a gerund phrase. The infinitive form of the verb to be may be the verb to be is one, or anything that says to have, to do, to play, etc. May be an infinitive phrase and serve as a noun. To win is to lose. The participial phrase begins with a present or past participle. Stuck in the mud, the horse could not move. So these are the other types of phrases that you may come across and identify in your transcripts. Now, relax. You don't have to know everything to get good marks, to be assessed well. Knowing every single type of phrase is simply not necessary in the course. The important thing to remember is that a phrase is a group of words which performs a function of a particular word class. So if you can look at it and identify the noun and the verb, etc., then that will probably be enough information for you to be able to comment when you're analysing your transcripts. A phrase does not contain a subject and a finite verb, although it can contain one or the other and still maintain its phrase status. So, useful concepts to understand. These are things that I suggest you add to your notes. So if you're keeping a Notion page or you're using Google Docs or Word, make sure you've got these headings so that you can highlight when you've learnt them. I just like using the traffic light system. Green for nailed it, I know it really well. Yellow for I sort of know it, but I probably need to do a bit more work on it. And red for don't know it at all. Obviously, when you sit down to study, go for the red and the yellow and try to make all your notes become green, which means that you know this work. So some good things to look up and to make sure that you add to your notes: finite and infinite and non-finite verbs, transitive and intransitive verbs, active and passive voice, lexical and grammatical ambiguity, elliptical sentence and sentence fragments. Coming up episodes, I'll tackle each of these in the future. But for now, it's really good for you to do your own research and sort of try to nut them out yourself in your heads. So often when we can include phrases in our sentences, we do so incorrectly. And this can lead to our sentences becoming ambiguous. For example, our neighbour saw the truck crash into the house across the street through the window. Very hard there to pick out exactly what is happening. Now, it probably doesn't sound too bad because often this is how we speak, but when we're writing this down on the page, it's going to make it unclear. Calmly grazing in the paddock, Jim finally discovered his lost horse. Who was grazing in the paddock? Was it Jim or was it his horse? Same with our previous sentence. The neighbour saw the truck crash into the house across the street through the window. Did the truck crash across the street or did it go through the window? What's happening there? It's always best when you're editing your own work and trying to get it up to a high standard to read it out aloud. When you read it out aloud, you're more likely to pick up your errors than just reading on the page and reading what you expect to see there. So this brings us to clauses. What are clauses? Every sentence contains at least one clause. A clause is a group of words which contain a subject and a finite verb. In other words, a subject and a predicate. So types of clauses. We have an independent clause, or it's also called the main clause. An independent clause has a subject and a verb, and it can stand alone in a sentence. In other words, the independent clause is the same as a simple sentence. The following on this slide here is the simple sentences or clauses, and I think if you read them, you'll get an idea of what to look for. So each has a subject and a verb. The woman with the red hat, subject, ran home, predicate. The students, subject, prepared for the ball or prepared for the formal. Subjects and predicate. Therefore, these are clauses. They're different than to phrases. And continuing with our types of clauses. Dependent clause or a subordinate clause. What's different about a dependent clause? An dependent clause can stand alone, but a dependent clause cannot. So an independent clause can stand on its own 2 feet or its own lexemes. The dependent clause cannot. A dependent clause has a subject and a verb, but information is missing. So here are some examples. Because it's too hot. Because what's too hot? What's it? See, it's not giving you the information you need. If I have enough money, then what? You see how there's something needs to follow? Who it is, which jacket I should buy. A dependent clause must be a part of a sentence that has an independent clause. So let's put it all together. Different sentence structures. First of all, there are simple sentences. A simple sentence contains one main or independent clause. It has only one subject and one predicate. So when you're analysing a text, you say the simple sentence used in line 8 and what it does, or how it brings cohesion, or how it makes it easily understood, or how it raises the point. A compound sentence contains two or more main or independent clauses. So in a compound sentence, the two independent clauses are joined by coordinators. And coordinators are words such as for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. Now, a cool way of remembering that is fanboys, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard that out there before, but it's good to have a reminder. So if you want to remember how to identify a compound sentence, the two independent clauses have a joiner, and one of those joiners, it's called a coordinator. It's for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so, or fanboys. So different sentences structure there. Let's look now at a complex sentence. How do I identify a complex sentence? A complex sentence has one independent main clause and one or more dependent clauses. Dependent clauses are joined to independent clauses by subordinators. For example, although, because, since, when, after, that, which, and who. So if you see those words, pretty sure then you're dealing with a complex sentence. A compound complex sentence. A compound complex sentence has two or more clauses and one or more subordinate clauses. So that's how you would identify whether it's a complex or compound sentence. Remember to use this meta language when you're analysing your texts. So, finally, in English, we sometimes play with the order of our words in order to make them more or less important, having more or less of an impact. An example of this is when we write in the active or passive voice. Now, the active voice is when the subject performs an action. I, the subject, threw the rock. The passive voice is actually performed on the subject by the object. The rock was thrown by me. Okay, the rock becomes the subject by me. Now, even if you're not an English language student where you have to do analysis of this and you're an English student, it's really good to know when to use the active voice and when to use the passive voice, and use it deliberately, okay, to create an effect. So the passive voice may at times render your writing more coherent. That brings me to the end of this session today. For inquiries about online one-to-one or small group tutoring, exam prep, or even summer school this December for VCE English Language Units 3 and 4, all inquiries, and to make a booking, you just send an email inquiry. If you're a Year 11 and going into Units 1 or 2, you could also, and you want some preparation for that, please also email to arrange a private one-on-one session or a small group session. Both are available. And don't forget, please, if you liked this little session, to please like it, subscribe and share. Bye for now.